Welcome to episode 9H of Climate Trees and Legacy. This is the 8th installment in the 9th episode, which is about Coast Redwoods and also giant sequoias. But this one's just about Coast Redwoods. Some of the other episodes in this series dealt with the needs for assisted migration of Joshua tree, some other trees. I've also worked with Florida terrain, an endangered species, a glacial relic that absolutely needs to head north. But the question always is, for some of these widespread trees, when and where do they need to go? And horticultural plantings that have already happened some a century ago, for Coast Redwood, up in the Puget Sound, Salish Sea area, give a lot of evidence that they're already capable of living there. So previous episodes were all about that, taking a look at Puget Sound and the kinds of naturalization, the seeding that already goes on there. This one is dealing with a very different issue, and that is, how do we know when it's time for the Coast Redwoods in Northern California? They're restricted range there along the coast. They need fog. How do we know when it's time for them to move? That is, where they're no longer able to thrive, either being attacked by bark beetles, as some conifers are, or in this case, is a lack of cone production or reduction in cone production year after year. Is that a signal that they're already stressed? And when you look around in the forests, even if there is cone production and seeds produced, are those seedlings able to establish? Can they make it through the longer dry times of the summer, the reduction in fog that long-term residents see there along the coast? Those are the questions. So I don't have any answers about that, but I did stumble upon some evidence this summer, late this summer, August, September, when we had an opportunity to live in Humboldt County near Eureka, Arcata, and where my husband and I were using the library at Humboldt State University, which is full of Coast Redwoods on campus. We needed to use the library for internet. And I started to notice there, just as I had noticed in the regrowth forest all around the area where we were living, like, why is it that the Douglas fir in this forest are producing cones? I can see cones all over the ground from last year, but I see no Coast Redwood cones, none of the old ones. And as I look up, I don't see any new ones forming either. I mean, what's going on? I hadn't thought too much about that until, when was it? Mid-September. I visited Humboldt State University campus, and we parked in a place where I happened to notice that the redwood right there had some cones on it. And then I started looking underneath it, and it had fallen cones from last year. And so I thought, well, what's different here? I'll show you what's different here in that very first site. So what you see there is a watered lawn, okay? My understanding from the residents is that there was no measurable rain this past summer, summer of 2019, since mid-May to about early September, September 10th, something like that. And I know it was a problem too, because we were house sitting, and for our last 3 weeks of house sitting there, the spring had gone dry, so we had no running water. It's a desperate situation there. So what I'm going to show in this episode is entirely, with one exception, is entirely video documentation I took on Humboldt State University, where I was testing this hypothesis. It's the only place that you find redwood trees actually producing cones, green cones this year, still hanging on the tree, not yet opening their scales in September, and still old cones from last year that already had brown and their scales had opened and all the seeds had come out already, but were also starting to drop along with their deciduous little branchlets that they're attached to. So you could actually see, just by looking at the ground underneath, you could see whether there were any old cones from last year starting to drop. My hypothesis was, I wonder if the only place I'm seeing cones is where there's some artificial water source coming in, as in that watered lawn near the first one. So what you're going to see in this series, I tried to be evidential about it. I wasn't obscuring things, but I was seeking out the trees where I could actually see some cones. And from what I can tell, they all had access to artificial water, either directly from a mowed lawn, from a gutter coming off one of the roofs of the buildings on campus, or it's got quite a slope on campus too, whether there was a parking area that had a slope in which the rain would come down and come right up against a planting or an old grove of redwoods. And there I could also find cones. So I offer this as evidence. You'll hear my interpretations along the way. But again, in science, you present the evidence. You might have a hypothesis, as I do. And my hypothesis is that there's already evidence that coast redwoods in their major habitat, coast of Humboldt County there, and in the national parks to the north. As I was heading north, I was looking for cones and seedlings along the way. Even though the trees look incredibly healthy, you don't see them losing their needles or anything like that. I think that the lack of cone production may be attributable to a shift in climate. And if that's the case, that's a signal that we need to start rescuing some of the genetic material down there and getting them up, not just in horticultural plantings in Puget Sound, but actually regrowth wild forest. So let's get started. So first, I'm going to show the distinction between the green cones of the current year that ripen in late September and start to open their scales October, November, as the winds come through, from the older cones that hang on through the summer. Their seeds are gone. Their seeds are no longer viable if any are stuck in there, but they start to fall off the tree in September. So that's what you can see here. So the next 42 minutes will be my voice video documentation on campus two times. The first, September 17th, and the second and the last time, September 26th. I've combined them, where I was exploring campus, looking for cones and no cones on the campus trees and what might be the distinction between those two. After these 42 minutes, I'll have a brief ending where I'll talk about my recommendations for the Humboldt State University, the landscaping on campus, something that students could monitor and make suggestions for in terms of how to work with those distinctions between the redwoods to ensure longevity as long as possible as climate changes. And then I'm going to show a video documentation that I did in very early October in Portland, Oregon, and a horticultural planting there, where I found coast redwoods covered with cones. So let's get started. Back September 2019, Humboldt State University campus video documentation of redwoods there. Our campus tour of redwoods is going to start right there. The several that's right by the car. See, they're not very tall, not very old. But what they have next to them is a watered lawn, and this is the first place a few days ago when I was here and we were parked along there that I was stunned to find cones, because everywhere else I've looked on Pacific Lumber Camp Road in the wild regrowth forest, I haven't seen any. So Let's go take a look. There's a new cone hanging right in the center there. There's a couple more new ones this year. Now here's what does it. Here's a green lawn stretching for quite a ways. And I've collected a few of the ones where I've been able to find deciduous branches that have fallen with cones still attached. So this is recent falls here. I'll zoom in. I put them all in the same spot here. So these are the recent falls of the cones. You see, these were all last year's, all opened up. I've looked, no seeds left, but I have seen in some before, some, maybe one seed will get stuck in there. Nonetheless, there's no way it would have survived through the whole summer. They just don't survive that long. Now here is a long fallen branchlet. Often they have a number of growth spurts on it, and I don't know what that is at the tip there, whether that's a cone that would have formed and dropped off, or whether it's just a vegetative structure. But you kind of wonder, why would it put a vegetative structure on and then decide to lose the branchlet later on? I don't know. Maybe it does that. Let's take a look at some of these other fallen branchlets. Oh, there's one. There's one that has some kind of a formation at the end of it. Let's see how far back that goes. Okay. So back here to the cones, let's take a closer look. So the ones with the cones, last year's cones, tend to be just a single branchlet that falls off. I know they have very shallow roots. Here we can see a root that's definitely heading off into the lawn. Here's the tree with its basils. And here's another root, shallow root heading off. And some more right here. So let's see if we can get a close look at the vibrant green balls at the end of these two here and attempt to discern whether those will be cones, waiting for the, I think it's a spring pollination, February, March, that happens right after the rainy season. Or whether that's just awaiting new vegetative growth. Not all of them have that. Let's move up to another spot here and see what we've got. Now this is in pure sun here, so this would be where you would expect to find cones. Except that's two there, and that's two. So I'm not aware that they ever do two cones, so that's probably just sunny side buds for new vegetative growth getting ready to start. Here's a redwood pear that's on campus, short ways away. It's got a sidewalk along here, but more importantly, here is a mowed lawn that obviously gets watered. So this whole area gets water in here. And it was very easy for me to find cones. So it's really prolific. I found these on the lawn, so that means that they were just recently dropped since the last time the lawn was mowed. And you can see, in general, when a cone is formed, it's just the last branchlet. It's not like one of these sections that have many branchlets longitudinally attached. Though this one up here, you can see it does have a branchlet coming off of there. Single cones, but I've never seen this before. Now again, I haven't really been able to find many cones, but this is a cluster of cones here, so I don't know what that's about. So you can see kind of the rate of fall that's going on here on the grass. So I'm going to take a look upward and see if I can get a close-up of any newly forming cones. Here's another look at these two trees. I see a couple cones, old cones, up in here. There's one center towards the back, and there's another one lower down I can't really get in on. And I see another one over to the left here. I'll try to get close to it. Yeah, there it is. It's hanging down from up there. I've been using my telephoto here to try to look for cones high up, but have not been able to spot any. One would think that they would be there, and that's south-facing side, so there may be a preference for that, I don't know. But you can see how tall this tree grows. Here's another look at the two trunks. Probably clones, so same genotype. And here's the basals, ready to grow if need be. And here's where the first branches start. More redwoods back in there. I'll look at them next. Okay, I came from just the other side of that group of trees there, and I've been walking up this, and I've just seen, I haven't looked real carefully, but I've been looking the whole time, and I've seen no cones on these recently fallen. None at all. And so here's where we are. Here's in here. And it continues back there. So here's a parking lot here, and normally the curve looks like it prevents water from going down, but right here there's a break, and looks like water can go there, and certainly with this kind of plant that grows here, you would guess that somehow it gets water. Here you can see the sword ferns, but what I'd like to point out here is this is a rather dense forested area, a lot of trunks, regrowth forest coming up, you can see here. Ah, here comes the sun, this really shows it. So this tree is putting out a branch that comes out from up right around there, and then comes out and displays all this foliage for gaining sun. There's another one that does the same there. And that one comes out, oh my gosh, that one comes out, I'll put it right in the center of the picture, comes out from right up there, that far trunk, and comes down all the way to the ground, gaining sun. So that's quite an adaptation. I'll look around. Right here, I didn't see any in this area. Here's a couple trunks here, but you can see all the deciduous that's down, and it's a little harder to find cones in this kind of a setting, but when I walked over here initially along the road, I only saw 2 fallen cones, one that I have right here, the other one was smashed. And so it doesn't look like they're prolific, or if they are, they just haven't dropped their cones yet. There's one there. But you can see this is an old stump from long ago. Certainly those right there would be clones, starting off as basil sprouts, kind of like you can see all those basil sprouts growing in there, even a good distance away. So I just came from back there. You can see this is a whole redwood forest here, and behind me I'm at the end of the parking area. And unfortunately, the way the water flows here, this does not look good for any of this parking area to actually get down into the trees. Now there is an exception here, possibly, and you can see that before this fence was up, there was a path that went down here that people could have walked. But if any water goes down there, it just heads down that path. So maybe the ones at the bottom get something, but not the ones up here. And moreover, I've seen absolutely no cones in this paved area that underlies the trees. None whatsoever. So, not very hopeful here. So that's this edge of campus. I'm going to head back that way and see if I can find some lone trees. And again, I'll be looking. If they don't have cones under them, newly fallen, it means they probably don't have any fresh ones on them either. So I just came from up there, and you can see the angle of the pavement and so forth. It looks like some should drop into there. As I mentioned, I thought I saw a place there. Maybe right off into here. No erosion in there, though. The one place where there is an actual drainage here, you can see all the little branchlets that have been gathered down here, and this would be draining from up this area here. It would be draining down into here. And again, those are the 2 that I surveyed first in this area by that sign there. Okay, right in the center of the picture are the first 2 trees I visited, where I found the cones and was able to find some green cones that will be putting out seeds this year. The only place thus far. Walking up here, I just stopped to show that we've got a sweet gum here. Liquid amber. And what's interesting about sweet gum is that prior to the ice ages, sweet gum used to be over here. Right now it's a eastern USA tree, not as far north as Michigan, but this is sweet gum, and horticulturally it's been planted here. Quite a few freshly fallen cones under this really huge redwood tree. Easy to find on the lawn here. I also found, I did not pluck this, it was on the lawn, just one of these. This is a new branchlet that's fallen in here. You can see probably the vegetative structures there, not cones. But very fresh, looks very healthy. And over here, we just started having rain 3 days ago. It hadn't rained since May, and it's now late September. So that mushroom came up, and here is the giant. And the branches start too high up for me to be able to even see. But I would imagine there's some new cones on here. And as you can see, this is watered. This is the big difference. This is the lawn here that's watered. ferns growing here. Big lawn area to come into this area. All right. Look at these gigantic. These are mushrooms here. That's a mushroom. And I don't think it's from the redwood because when I walk in this direction, here's one here, and it's by a birch. All right, so that tree's probably got some cones on it. It's got some wonderful watered lawn here. Let's keep looking. Okay, I came from up there, 17th Street here, and this is a natural resources building. And I have just hit the mother lode. Look at the cone production on here. Absolutely outstanding. Oh my gosh. Last year's cones. Do we have some green ones here too? Yep. There's some green ones. Yeah, out towards the end. All right, so we have got a very happy tree here. And here's the building. So maybe, oh, look at there. Oh, that's where the rainwater comes. But again, we don't really have rain. Well, we have fog production, which would congeal on the roofs. Right here, I'll have to take a look and see where that goes. But this is awesome. Okay, that far one is the one I just looked at. Here it's neighbor. And the storm drainage, you can see the pipe coming down there in between them. This one also is absolutely prolific in its cone production. Look like all older oh no, look at, there's two green ones there. Oh, here's some more green ones to the left. Continuing up. Oh, let's take a look out on here. I'm in the natural resources building right now, and fortunately there's a window right here where I can look straight across. Look at that. These are the cones on the second tree that I filmed. These are the new ones. And then further back are the older ones that will be dropping off. And there's the tree right here. And its neighbor is right over there. This is awesome. I just stepped up to see where that drainage from the roof comes down. Well, it goes into this, and I put my hand underneath this section here, and there are holes. So when it rains, it feels like it each is about a ½ inch. Let's see, and the distance between them about 2 inches. So, oh, this is awesome. This is really terrific. So this explains why those trees. Now, you got to have rain, or at least you have to have some kind of precipitation up there. So it could be that the roof does generate moisture from the fogs. I know a glass table out on our deck does that very easily. And sloping enough, it could accumulate and go right here. Wow. I'm going to look around and see if there's any other pipes like this, or whether this drains the whole roof. Let's go see. So I was just over at that end of the building with the tree. Come over here. Here's another one. Another drainage from the roof. And look at the pipe right down there, serving these ferns. There's another drainage there from that corner and coming down. Looks like a birch tree there. So yeah, it's serving this garden. Here's another tree, very near the previous two, absolutely prolific. South is off to the left here. And here's what it looks like. A set here, right in a parking lot on a pretty steep slope. So when we try to figure out what's going on here, you see there's obviously the grass isn't being watered in there. There'd be no reason to. But this is Coast Redwood, and they have shallow roots, and they really upset the asphalt here. So here you can see a root taking off in this direction. You can see another root taking off in this direction here. And look at how it opens the cracks in there. Who knows how far it goes after that, but also on this side here, as I turn around, oh, let's take a look here. 1, 2, this one's got a lot of basils, and 3, and I'll look at the individuals, but this one here has got the south-facing side here, and take a look at that root there. So water, you can see all the cracks there in the asphalt. So water is heading down. Look at this. This is a huge slope of water that comes down through here and gets captured, stopped going in right in this area. In fact, you can see the wetness here from we had rains yesterday and the day before. You can see how wet this area still is in here. So, oh, here's a couple that are really close in here. Take a look. Both the old brown cones and the new ones. All right, here's the middle one. I'm on the southwest side, and one of these two branches here is coming out and producing seeds quite prolifically here. Look at all these green ones, this year's. I've traced this branch back to the middle tree. A couple old ones. Oh, and up there too. There you can see right in there. That would also be from this middle tree. I've not been able to see the closest to the south side here on this leftmost tree here. Again, looking down, there just isn't anything on this tree. And here, you can see silhouettes are really easy to spot. Nothing here. Nothing at all. So let's go take a look at the very north-facing side. But first, here's a good black background of the trunk to look at those cones. With last year's cones up above it. All right, so I'm going to wander down to that side and see if I can see any cones. On a quick look there, I wasn't able to see any, but that's the north-facing side where those cars are. Okay, that's an east-facing side coming out of the middle tree. And moving down here, I also saw some more. Yep, right there. You see how that just sticks out over on the east-facing side. But over here, I'm on the north side now, and there's just nothing that I see anywhere here. So let's take a look at the base area here. This looks to me like there's a root under there that's able to get some of the water that comes through. But it looks like this tree here just isn't reproducing. So it may be both water and a necessity to have some sunlight. The conifer I work with, Torreya taxifolia, will only produce seeds on the sunlight facing areas of the tree. All right, let's continue our search. Okay, I'm on the southeast facing side of these trees, so if there were any cones, they'd be here. Tall trees, no cones. And if we wander over here, we can see that where they are, the grass is brown. So right around this building, there's no artificial watering going on. So no cones here. Here you can see a cluster of the rain the last 2 days. But there, again, no rain for 3 months. And so we have a whole set here of pretty tall redwoods. Whole set, but it's not artificially watered in there. And this is the south-facing side here. We were just down at that group there. And where I was showing the reproductive trees, that cluster there with, gosh, that's a eucalyptus coming way out above them. And there's the parking area down below, straight in there. And that's the forestry building. So here's that same set of trees, looking back up at them as I wander down the road. You can see some sedges in here, so when it rains, there's a drainage that comes through here, and here you can see where it goes down underneath. But this whole slope over here, brown grasses, not watered. Here's the setting. And I did find a few cones. Okay, I'll have to look and see if any of that parking lot actively drains into them. But I also saw quite a few of probably pollen structures forming down low. So I'll get a close-up of that too. There are some old cones hanging. You can see that there's some sun on that side there. It's far enough, late enough in the afternoon. That's a westerly side there that the sun's starting to track in. I was able to gather quite a few cones here. Most of them look like they were certainly not newly fallen. They would have been falling a year ago from having been growing the previous year. So 2 years ago they would have had viable seeds just opening up in there. What's interesting here is this middle one right there would have been newly fallen, and on the same branchlet there it's got one cone and there it's got another right there. So that one would have, looks to me like it probably fell last year. The ones with the clearly the golden news, some with a little bit of green, tend to be more brown rather than gray in terms of the cones. But again, all these were collected underneath that tree. Here are the ones here. I've looked under here. These don't have cones under them, but I will show some of the male, looks like male structures forming on some of the lower branches. But let's take a look again. So here is the tree, close up at the bottom of it. The only one that had cones, and prolifically underneath here. I just walked around and I was able to gather quite a few cones here. You can see it goes downhill over to there, and then there's a couple more over there. But I think the reason this one had cones is this parking lot goes upslope from here, and it looks to me like certainly the water can gather in here. You can see some of the splots from a few days ago gathering. So we did have rains last week, and here's, you can see some water gathered here, but I think this is the main area where it's not blocked off by a curb, and it just pretty much settles into there. And then the tree must have prolific roots over here in this area. But again, those over there did not produce cones. There's no cones under them, and there would certainly be, as I found here, most of the cones were from 2 years ago, not this year's fallen, but from last year's fallen, and the year before that would have been when they were viable with seeds. So standing back, there's a tree right in the center that would gather the water from this pretty vast parking area here, but not the ones back there by the street. On this north-facing side, here is, these are vegetative buds, very clearly vegetative buds on the north-facing side. But I do not see any of the kinds of buds that I was seeing over on the south-facing side here. Again, that's the one. Oh, look at multi-stemmed up there. Wow. This is the one, aggregate of stems. This is, again, the only one that was producing cones. So I'm going to go over here and take a look at what are probably the pollen buds that, you know, if you don't have the water to make the female cones, you might as well make the males. Let's go see them. Here's a comparison of from the same nearby low branches. Pollen cone forming on the right, and then vegetative on the left, and more vegetative. So it's just really easy to see the distinctions. Again, those are the upper surfaces, and here's lower surfaces. Reproductive, probably pollen there, pollen forming there, vegetative growth there, last year, pollen, actually last winter, spring. And again, you can see the underside, the white stomata here. Three gutters here. This one's been dislodged, but the exit to it is only over there anyway. Here's a couple more here. One there, and then there, further back. So these gutters are coming off the roof of what appears to be a residence hall here. And all that greenery up there is redwood. So here they are on this slope, and they are getting extra water. The only one that probably isn't, no, this is, because this one here can easily reach over to here and get some that drains off in here. So quite a slope. And then over here, let's take a look. Here you can see this one's very active, where it splashes into this area right here. Created kind of a splash hole in there, and there it goes. Oh my gosh, that looks like a sugar pine cone in there. But here's the redwood stems in here with basils. And then, yeah, this looks like, I don't know what kind of a pine cone that is, but somewhere in California. But here's the other one right here. And this one also gets a lot of water that comes out right into there. And is there any over here? Wow. Here's the old stump. Look at that. And then here's the what's called a fairy ring of regrowth that came around it. And I'll have to see whether this group here, which has the water coming out on both sides of it, whether that group of redwoods has cones under it, and whether this one maybe doesn't. So again, let me look and see if there's anything coming out. Whatever comes through that pipe, it's created just this fast track trail down through here. I'm sure, you know, the redwood roots go under here, but it looks like it just goes head on out down to the parking lot. So it's very different from those other, here's a good view, from those other two gutters in there that go into the very, very deep mulch of the old shed branchlets. And there's the parking lot that's got, look at those three big ones there. Be interesting to check and see if there's any cones. So obviously they kind of keep sweeping that area off. But these here, let's go check it out. So that's the cluster on the eastern side with the really big old stump in there. There's a close-up of the logged and burned stump. The basils coming out around it. I found one cone, this cone, on the uphill side of it here, but again, that's the one that's got the trace coming down where the water just moves real fast off to the parking area. When I looked in this front area here, I found no cones. Wasn't looking really, really well, but even just getting this far here, walking along, I just noticed this cone right here. And that's right down from this cluster that's got, on both sides of it, it's got a gutter there, you can see in the center there. It's got a gutter that comes down and into the mulch, so it sinks in. So let's take a look more in this vastness of leaf material here and see if I see any more cones. So just standing right here, I found about, 7 or 8, just within less than a minute, looking carefully right at the base of this one here, and then there's another one back there, and then some more here. So there's definitely cone production. So yep, cones here. Okay, cones on this one on the sunny side. Look at them all. Okay, now this is further to the northwest. This tree here, 2 poles to the right of it is where a gutter comes down there. So a root could get there, but what this one has that the other ones don't is it's got this gorgeous watered green lawn right here. And see, over there are the other clumps that I was just looking at. So prolific cones here. I'll take a look at anything on the lawn would be newly fallen, because obviously this is a mowed lawn here. All right, there's the tree, here's the lawn. In less than a minute, I just grabbed all of these. So with the intense sun that we've got here, it must be about 2 o'clock in the afternoon now, and the sun's directly behind me. Look at all these cones. Green lawn, a lot of sun, makes for prolific cone production. So that's it for the late September 2019 quick little tour of cone production and non-cone production of Coast Redwoods on the campus of Humboldt State University in Redwood country of Northern California, right along the once foggy coast. Now, the recommendations that I would have, just based on my little experience there, for ensuring as much longevity as can be had for these Coast Redwoods on campus, even while climate changes. Couple things. Number one, let's have students annually survey the coning of the trees and get a sense of year to year whether there's any distinctions in cone production, and the ones that are still coning now, whether there's a reduction of coning going on, and therefore maybe some help that needs to be extended to them. But right now, just with the 3 kinds of artificial water sources that don't seem to be intentional, but need to be maintained. All trees will make their roots based on what the kind of moisture levels they get. So if there's a coast redwood that is right next to a watered lawn for the really dry time that you have during the summer, it's probably got its roots extending out into the lawn and rather shallow. What that means is you don't want to cut off the water there. So no matter what happens with water shortages, make sure that the lawns are continued to be watered if there's coast redwoods along them that may be requiring that. Same goes for the roof gutters. Check on those roof gutters and make sure that they're still putting into duff so that the water coming off the roofs can actually sink in rather than running off quickly. And maybe consider for the other redwoods of readjusting where the gutters are and having them start to provision more of the roof gutters into redwoods nearby. Ditto for the parking areas. That first parking area I show, it doesn't look like it's doing too much for the redwoods, but it could. It's a little bit of establishing a little bit of a hill through there that prevents the downward flow and moves it off to the edge of where the redwoods were and make a little kind of a duff area in there. That could help. But the last parking area, or actually the middle parking area that I showed by the forestry building there, that one where you can see that the roots have uplifted the asphalt and there's cracks in it. And so therefore the trees can get water. Don't repave that without assistance from the forestry department people themselves as to how to ensure that those existing roots keep getting water. That's really, really important. So those are the three things: watered lawn, roof gutters, and paved areas that already have roots taking water from the paved parking areas. One last thing I'd like to show here, and that is in Laurelhurst Park in Portland, October 4th, I happened to be there at exactly the right day. And you'll see why when I show you this video. Then I'll talk about it. Here's the big redwood double-stemmed right along the pond in Laurelhurst Park. And absolutely amazing. Not only do they have cones, but the squirrels have done me a favor. Look at this. They have harvested the cones, just dropping them. I'll show a close-up, but there are ones in here where you can see that the stem was cut, because these are things that are really hard to remove when they're at this stage. So what that means for me is not only am I able to get some more redwood seeds, it means those seeds are viable at this time of year, because they wouldn't harvest them if they hadn't fully developed, their protein and their fat content and all. And so gratitude to the squirrels. I'm not going to take all your workings here, but I will take some. October 31st, 2019. Total of 43 cones that I had harvested. Actually, that the squirrels had harvested and then I just picked up from the ground. They just cut them. They're all still green. And so, what is it, about 4 weeks later now, I've just shaken them within paper bags to get any seeds that would come out. And look at all the seeds that came out. I'll take a close-up look here. To me, they look really dark and really healthy. Some of the literature I read, it sounded like the timber companies back in the 60s, before they started climbing trees, just basically went out when those squirrels were harvesting them and did just what I did. You wait under the trees, you get the cones that the squirrels have harvested. Very interesting on the squirrel harvested cones. So the importance of that Laurelhurst video is to show that we can't assume that just because we don't see cones on the tree or we don't see older cones below means that there hasn't been cone production. If you've got the red squirrels in there and they value those cones, the red squirrels are already in the areas with Douglas fir, valuing the Douglas fir cones. If they are actively gathering cones, cutting them off the trees, and then hiding them somewhere, and if I had come along a week later, I would have looked at those trees and go, wow, not many cones here, are there? So there's a lot of things in the sciences when we're doing the basic natural history observations that we have to be open to being wrong about. I don't know what to think about the Laurelhurst cones being cut by red squirrels, but I do know that this past summer I only heard and saw one red squirrel in the regrowth forest in the Arcata area where we were spending time. And the previous 3 summers ago when we were there, the previous time that we were there, there was just one red squirrel, and that red squirrel was in the big leaf maple right by the house. And it would yell at me. I don't know why it was yelling at me, but that was the only red squirrel I saw, and I didn't see any cones that year either. So a lot to understand about doing an inventory of the red squirrels. I don't think the gray squirrels will harvest the conifer trees at all. They're just too heavy. The red squirrels are light enough that they can go down there and they can hang on there and cut off the cones while they're still green without falling off the tree. So anyway, that's it for the end of this particular evidential video. Again, I offer others to make their own interpretations, and if I come up with any new evidence while I'm still alive and have a video camera and YouTube still exists, I'll be posting more evidence. So, may the forest be with you and with the Coast Redwoods.